My fiancée Jessica said it with a proud smile like she'd just solved world hunger. I did it, David! I invested the $80,000. Our entire house down payment? It's in my friend's crypto startup. We're going to be rich. She looked at me, expecting applause. You should be thanking me. I looked back at her, my face a perfect mask of calm. I trust your judgment, I said. Then I reported her to the FBI. I'm David, 36 years old. I'm a data analyst. My world revolves around order patterns and the cold, hard comfort of verifiable facts. For 4 years, my world also revolved around Jessica. She was 33, a marketing manager, and her world was built on perception image and the compelling art of telling a good story. Maybe I should have recognized the fundamental, irreconcilable conflict in that from the very beginning. That $80,000 fund wasn't just a number on a screen, it was tangible. It was 5 years of my life meticulously planned, 5 years of automatic transfers, of saying no to frivolous upgrades, of funneling a disciplined portion of my salary and what was left of my dad's inheritance into a single sacred goal. It was the down payment for our first home in the suburbs. It was real. It was our future mapped out on a spreadsheet, cell by cell. Jessica, on the other hand, saw our future mapped out on her Instagram feed. Her reality was a curated mosaic of other people's highlight reels. She was obsessed with the power couples in her social circle friends who vacationed in Bali and drove leased German cars they couldn't really afford. She never saw the mountain of debt behind the filters. She only saw the aspirational image, and she was desperate to replicate it no matter the cost. That Thursday afternoon sits in my mind like a crime scene. I was running projections for property taxes on our potential new house. I logged into the savings account and the numbers didn't compute. My screen showed $1,847. I blinked, refreshed the page. The number stared back, mocking me. A cold dread, sharp and acidic, clawed its way up my throat. My hands were shaking as I called the bank, my voice sounding distant like it belonged to someone else. I was praying for a system error, a glitch, some logical explanation. The representative's voice was clinical, devoid of emotion. An authorized user, Jessica Winters, withdrew $80,000 via wire transfer on October 3rd. 2 weeks ago, I was at a data science conference in Chicago. I had given her access for emergencies. I guess this in her mind was an emergency of opportunity? Then I called her. The conversation is burned into my memory, a permanent scar. Jess, where's the money from the savings? I asked, keeping my voice steady through sheer force of will. I heard the pause on the other end, but it wasn't a pause of guilt, it was the pause before a drum roll. Then her voice exploded with pure, unadulterated excitement. Oh my God! Babe, I was going to surprise you tonight. I invested it! She gushed about her friend Brianna, a life coach from her upscale yoga class. She spoke of an amazing crypto platform called Next Gen Coin that was poised to revolutionize decentralized finance. She told me with the breathless conviction of a true believer that we were going to be rich. She'd seen the projections, she said, 400% returns in 6 months. I invested the whole $80K to maximize our profits, she chirped, as if she were talking about using a coupon at the grocery store. You took $80,000 without asking me, I said. My voice was flat, all the air sucked out of it. I knew you'd overthink it, she replied, her tone shifting instantly to condescension. You always do with investments, David. You're too cautious. Sometimes you just have to trust your gut and take a leap of faith. That was my inheritance from my dad, Jess. You knew that. It was all I had left of him. Her response was immediate, chillingly dismissive. And now, it'll be worth $320,000. He would be proud. You should be thanking me. I hung up. I sat there in the sterile quiet of my home office for what felt like an hour, the silence screaming. And in that silence, all the little red flags I had willfully ignored for years began to unfurl, waving frantically in my memory. There was the constant low-grade complaining, the subtle sighs whenever a friend announced a promotion or a lavish purchase. Why can't we have that? She'd ask, scrolling through photos of someone else's life, her face illuminated by the phone's glow, filled with a discontent that my steady, reliable love could never seem to fill. There was her blind, almost cult-like admiration for Brianna. Brianna, who posted endless motivational quotes from the driver's seat of a rented Lamborghini and hosted webinars on manifesting wealth. Jessica saw a guru. I saw a walking, talking advertisement for a get-rich-quick scheme. She'd parrot Brianna's empty phrases at me. Scarcity mindset is holding you back, David. Brianna says you have to spend money to make money. I just nod, too tired to start another fight about her aspirational friends. And then there was the credit card incident. 6 months ago, I found a bill for an American Express Platinum card I didn't recognize. When I confronted her, she got defensive. It's for my personal brand, David. I need to invest in my image if I want to get ahead. She was spending hundreds, sometimes thousands of dollars a month on designer clothes, spa treatments, and dinners at restaurants she knew we couldn't afford all to project an image of success we simply didn't have. She was building a house of cards on a foundation of my life savings. Each red flag on its own had seemed manageable, annoying, but not a deal breaker. I told myself this was just compromise. But now, seeing them all laid out together, they weren't just flags. They were a detailed blueprint for this exact disaster. She didn't just make a reckless mistake. This was the logical, inevitable endpoint of her entire belief system, that image was more valuable than reality, that shortcuts were smarter than hard work, and that my money was ultimately her opportunity. She wanted a fight. She wanted tears, drama, a screaming match that would end with me exhausted and defeated, reluctantly accepting her vision. She wasn't going to get it. Arguing with someone who has abandoned reality for a fantasy is like trying to reason with a hurricane. It's a waste of energy, and you just end up getting swept away in their chaos. My father didn't raise a fool, and he certainly didn't raise a man who would beg for his own money back. Instead, I went back to my home office and closed the door. She thought my job was boring. All those years, she'd glazed over when I talked about data models and predictive analysis. She had no idea what that training had really equipped me to do. It taught me to ignore the noise, to follow the facts, and to find the truth hidden beneath layers of deception. She was about to get a masterclass. Then I went to work. I pulled up the NextGen Coin website. It was a cheap template riddled with stock photos of smiling, diverse business people and vague corporate jargon like synergistic blockchain paradigms and decentralized wealth actualization. It was meaningless. I ran a domain registration lookup. The website was less than 2 months old, registered anonymously through a proxy service in Panama. That was red flag number 1. Then I searched for their corporate filings. Nothing with the Securities and Exchange Commission. Nothing with FinCEN. They didn't legally exist as a financial entity in the United States. That was red flag number 2. Then I did what she thought was impossible. I used a blockchain explorer to trace the public wallet address they listed for investor funds. The money wasn't being traded, it wasn't being staked, it wasn't being invested in anything. It was being consolidated and then immediately funneled into a handful of private, untraceable wallets. It wasn't a trading platform, it was a digital bucket. That was red flag number 3, and it was the kill shot. The data was unequivocal. This wasn't an investment, it was a textbook Ponzi scheme. But my analysis was just one data point. To build a case, I needed a trend line. I needed more victims. I went to Facebook, not to NextGen Coin's official page full of fake testimonials, but to the dark corners of the platform. I searched for variations of NextGen Coin scam Brianna Matthews, legit and can't withdraw NextGen Coin funds. And there it was, a private group named NextGen Coin Investors Questions. It had only 12 members. The posts were nervous, confused, tinged with the quiet desperation of people who suspected they'd been had, but were too embarrassed to admit it. Has anyone been able to get their money out? One post read. Brianna stopped responding to my texts, said another. I created a throwaway account. No name, no photo, just a gray silhouette. I messaged the group admin. I'm a financial analyst who has looked into NextGen Coin. I have definitive proof it's a fraud. I'm not selling anything. I'm a victim too. I can help you organize. Within hours, my inbox was flooded. Stories poured in, each one a small tragedy. A retiree in Florida who'd invested his $30,000 pension. A single mom from Ohio who'd used her son's $15,000 college fund. A young couple who'd invested their own $20,000 house down payment. The total was staggering. We weren't just 12 people anymore. We were a class action lawsuit waiting to happen. I had my network. With the network established and the data verified, it was time to escalate. This was no longer a domestic dispute, it was a federal crime. I spent the entire night compiling everything into a single irrefutable dossier. I created spreadsheets detailing every victim I could find, every amount, every date. I included my blockchain analysis with annotated screenshots, the anonymous domain registration report, and a gallery of Brianna's lavish social media posts, the rented Lamborghinis, the designer bags, the champagne toast juxtaposed with the desperate testimonies of the people whose money had paid for it all. At 3 a.m., I went to the SEC's website and filed a formal tip through their whistleblower portal. I attached the entire dossier. Subject: Ponzi scheme operation, next-gen coin, Brianna Matthews. Then I did the same with the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center. I wasn't just a scorned fiancé anymore. I was a confidential informant. The reports were filed. The digital breadcrumbs were laid. Now came the hardest part, playing the role she'd cast for me. I had to go back to my life and pretend I was the same trusting, overthinking David she thought I was. Our engagement party was 3 days later, hosted at her parents' house. It was a surreal nightmare. Her friends, flushed with greed and cheap champagne, kept coming up to me. "Dude, Jessica's a genius. I'm up 10% already." I just smile and nod. She's got great instincts, I'd say. Jessica was in her element, the queen of the hour, a financial visionary in a $500 dress. She pulled me up in front of everyone, her arm wrapped tightly around mine. "I just want to thank my amazing fiancé, David," she said into the microphone, her voice dripping with condescending affection. He was skeptical at first. He's a numbers guy. The crowd chuckled. But now he sees the vision. He's my biggest supporter in this incredible financial journey. I smiled. I kissed her. The crowd applauded. And the entire time my phone was in my breast pocket, its voice memo app quietly recording every fraudulent promise, every lie, every word she used to lure the people we loved, our friends, her own family, deeper into her trap. I wasn't just collecting evidence against Brianna anymore. I was collecting it against her. The game had changed, and she had no idea she was already in check. With my support secured, Jessica's transformation was immediate and terrifying. She didn't just believe in the scam anymore, she became its high priestess. The woman I knew, the one with nuanced thoughts and a self-deprecating sense of humor, was gone. In her place was Crypto Queen Jessica, a two-dimensional caricature of a financial guru, speaking entirely in a language of empty buzzwords and aggressive positivity. Her social media became a fire hose of delusion. Every morning, another selfie with a long, rambling caption: "Stop trading time for money. Start letting your money work for you. PM me for the secret. Hashtag NextGenCoin, hashtag financial freedom, hashtag bossbabe." It was a masterclass in motivational gibberish. The comments were a mix of confused friends and other NextGenCoin believers. Yes, Queen, they'd write, manifesting that wealth. The ting of her phone notifications became the constant, irritating soundtrack of our apartment. She tried to recruit everyone. The barista at Starbucks, her dentist, her own family. That led to a Sunday dinner at her parents' house that was one of the most uncomfortable meals of my life. Her father, Robert, a retired accountant and a man who believed in hard numbers and tangible assets, listened patiently as Jessica drew diagrams on a napkin explaining the revolutionary decentralized network. "So what's the underlying asset?" Robert asked, a perfectly reasonable question. Jessica scoffed. "Dad, you're thinking old school. It's not about assets, it's about the network. The value is in the community of what Robert pressed gently. Of winners, Dad," she said, her voice laced with the condescension of the newly enlightened. "People who aren't afraid to embrace the future." Robert just looked at me over the rim of his glasses, a silent question in his eyes. I gave him a tiny, almost imperceptible shake of my head. He understood. He dropped the subject, but the seed of doubt was planted. The real explosion came a week later. She came home from a success mindset Zoom meeting with Brianna, her eyes glowing with a feverish light. "David, we have to talk," she said, pulling out a sheaf of printed papers that looked suspiciously like loan applications. "I've been talking to Brianna about bringing you in as a partner. If we invest another $50,000, we get moved to the platinum tier, 600% guaranteed returns." "We don't have another $50,000, Jess," I said calmly. "We could take out a home equity loan on your condo," she suggested, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "My condo, the one I bought before I even met her. Or borrow from your mom. She has good credit." I just stared at her. "Absolutely not," I said. Her face contorted with fury. "You're going to feel so stupid when Brianna's company goes public," she spat. "She's already talking to venture capitalists." Name one, I said. They're under NDAs, God. You know nothing about business. I know enough not to drain someone's savings without permission. It's called taking initiative, she screamed. Maybe if you weren't so risk-averse, we'd already be wealthy. This is why I didn't tell you. Then came the line, the one I will never forget. Your negative energy is affecting the blockchain algorithm. David Brianna says it's true. It's all about positive manifestation combined with the technology. She'd drunk the entire pitcher of Kool-Aid. There was no reasoning with her anymore. A few days later, she announced the grand finale of her delusion. NextGen Coin is having its first ever "Are you being like this?" she asked, her voice a mixture of frustration and genuine confusion. This is our big break. Brianna says this conference is where they're going to announce something huge. Maybe an IPO. You should be excited. I have to work, Jess. I said, my voice flat. It's a critical project. I can't get away. She sighed, a long, dramatic exhalation of disappointment. Your loss, she shrugged, already turning her attention back to her phone, scrolling through potential outfits for Miami. When I get back, we should look at houses. We'll be able to afford something amazing soon. She was living in a future that was never going to arrive. The 2 weeks leading up to the conference were the longest of my life. I was a ghost in my own home, a silent actor in a play I had already written the ending to. I smiled at her crypto updates. I nodded along to her recaps of the success mindset Zooms. I was a blank wall for her to bounce her delusions off of. Inside, a cold, patient anger was hardening into steel. Then the call came, 2 days before she was due to fly out. It was a Thursday morning just after 8 a.m. An unknown number with a Washington, D.C. area code. I stepped out onto the balcony, my heart a slow, heavy drum in my chest. This is David. The voice on the other end was female professional and held an authority that was unmistakable. Mr. David, this is Special Agent Diana Powell with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We're working in conjunction with the SEC on the NextGen Coin investigation. We've reviewed your submission. We need you to come to our field office today. I spent 4 hours in a small gray room that smelled faintly of stale coffee. They had everything. Bank records, server data, my blockchain analysis, cross-referenced with their own. Agent Powell laid out the entire operation like a patient teacher. It was a $14 million scam with over 200 victims across 12 states. Money flowed from victims to Brianna's accounts, then was laundered through a series of shell corporations before being wired to offshore accounts in countries that didn't cooperate with US law enforcement. It was a digital shell game, and my $80,000 was just one of the shells. Agent Powell slid a single sheet of paper across the metal table. It was a bank statement, a wire transfer into Jessica's personal checking account. Your fiancé received a $12,000 commission for recruiting a Miranda Walsh, she said, her eyes fixed on mine. My stomach dropped. I knew Jessica had convinced her coworker to invest, but I didn't know this. She's received 3 such payments so far. Agent Powell continued, her voice level, a total of $18,500. Did you know about this, sir? I shook my head, unable to speak. The last shred of hope that Jessica was just a naive, misguided victim evaporated under the harsh fluorescent lights of that room. She wasn't just a passenger on this sinking ship. She was one of the crew actively helping to drill the holes. She's been classified as a co-conspirator, the agent stated. We have warrants ready. The raids will happen tomorrow morning simultaneously in Miami and at Brianna Matthews's primary residence. Raids, yes. Your girlfriend will likely be arrested as well. I sat there, the air turning thick and heavy. She hadn't just been scammed, she had become part of the scam. What should I do? I finally asked. Act normal, Agent Powell advised. Do not tip her off. And, Mr. David, you might want to separate your remaining finances immediately. That night, the apartment was filled with the antsy, excited energy of her packing. She laid out dresses on the bed, humming to herself a vision of oblivious bliss. You sure you won't come? She asked one last time, holding up a sparkling cocktail dress. It's going to be life-changing. I have to work, I repeated. She kissed me goodbye at the door the next morning, her luggage packed with designer clothes and her investment portfolio binder. Love you, she said. When I get back, we'll go house hunting. Love you too, I said. It was the last normal conversation we would ever have. I called in sick to work. I sat on my sofa, the television on mute, my phone on the coffee table in front of me. I waited. 9 a.m. came and went. The conference was starting. I pictured her there in the hotel ballroom, surrounded by other hopefuls, listening to Brianna spin her web of lies one last time. At 9:17 a.m., my phone rang. Jessica. I let it ring 3 times, then answered. I didn't say a word. I was met with a wall of sound, a high-pitched, hysterical shriek that was barely recognizable as her voice. David, what did you do? What the hell did you do? In the background, I could hear chaos, shouting doors, slamming other people crying. What's wrong, Jess? I asked my voice, a perfect imitation of concern. The FBI, they're at Brianna's house, they're at the conference hotel, they're arresting everyone. Why? What's happening? Don't play dumb with me, she screamed, her voice cracking. They said someone reported us. It was you, wasn't it? You did this. Reported what, Jess? I asked, keeping my tone perfectly even. Your legitimate investment. There was a half-second of stunned silence, then pure, unadulterated rage. This is because you're jealous. You couldn't stand that I was successful without you. You wanted me to fail. Successful, I said. Can you withdraw any of that money, Jessica? Even the profits? That's not, Brianna explained. She stammered, her argument dissolving into incoherence. Then I delivered the final blow, the question that had been sitting like a stone in my gut for the last 24 hours. Did you know you were getting commissions, Jessica? The silence on the other end was absolute. It was louder than her screaming. In that void, I could hear everything. Her guilt, her shock, the sudden horrifying realization that I knew. I heard a new voice in the background, a calm, firm male voice. Ma'am, you need to come with us. No, she whimpered. I didn't do anything. David, call a lawyer. Get me out of this. The line went dead. I didn't call a lawyer for her. I called one for myself to make sure I wasn't liable for any of her crimes and to begin the long process of recovering whatever scraps were left of my father's legacy. The game was over. Checkmate. By noon, it was all over the local news. FBI raids multi-million-dollar cryptocurrency Ponzi scheme, $14 million stolen from over 200 victims. The lead story featured a smiling, professionally shot photo of Brianna Matthews, the charismatic guru. Right beside it was the mugshot of her top recruiter, her co-conspirator. It was Jessica. The image was brutal, and it went viral instantly. Mascara streamed down her face in black rivers. Her hair was a mess, her eyes wide with a kind of shell-shocked disbelief. But the most damning detail, the one that turned the whole tragedy into a dark, pathetic joke, was the shirt she was wearing. In bright, bubbly letters, it read, Next Gen Coin Founder. She had literally worn her crime to her own arrest. The fallout was a digital avalanche. Her carefully curated world of success and glamour didn't just crack, it was obliterated. The friends who had praised her as a visionary and a boss babe were the first to run. It was a mass extinction event on her social media. The tags vanished from photos at brunch, the gushing comments were deleted, her follower count, which she checked obsessively, began to plummet in real time. A few of the more prominent people in her circle even posted vague statements about cutting out toxic energy and the importance of integrity, a clear and public act of social distancing. Her father, Robert, called me that evening. His voice wasn't angry, it was just empty, hollowed out. David, he said, and the silence that followed felt heavy. I saw the news. I just wanted to say I'm sorry for everything, for not listening to my gut, for raising a daughter who... He couldn't finish the sentence. It's not your fault, Robert, I told him. She made her own choices. A choice, he said, his voice cracking, to throw everything away for a fantasy. I hope you find your peace in all this, son. You deserve it. He hung up before I could reply. And as I watched her friends, the ones who had toasted her at our engagement party and praised her financial genius, now scrambled to erase any digital connection to her, I realized Jessica wasn't just financially bankrupt. She was bankrupt in something far more important. This explains why Jessica's world collapsed so quickly. The answer lies in the concept of social capital. There are 2 types: bonding capital, which is built from genuine trust and sincere affection, and bridging capital, which is created from superficial relationships based on utility and image. Jessica's entire network was bridging capital. Her friends were people who admired the image of success that my $80,000 had helped create. They connected for the opportunity. When that financial foundation and the image it supported disappeared, her social capital evaporated instantly. They didn't betray her, they simply acted according to the true nature of their relationship. When the utility is gone, the connection is terminated. It is the expensive lesson learned when one builds a life on the shifting sands of surface-level values instead of the bedrock of authentic human connection. Understanding that the feeling of vindication began to fade, replaced by a cold, analytical clarity. Her social circle was just like her investment, a high-risk, high-volatility asset with no real underlying value. It was designed to look good on paper but was destined to crash. The news reports, the mugshot, the public shaming, it wasn't revenge. It was a market correction. It was the inevitable, logical outcome of a life built on lies. Her social bubble hadn't been burst by me or the FBI. It was a phantom asset all along. It had never really existed in the first place. Jessica made bail. Her parents, in a final, heartbreaking act of parental duty, put their house up as collateral. But she wasn't free. She was a ghost haunting the guest room of her childhood home, a 33-year-old woman trapped in the amber of her own failure. The life she had so carefully constructed, that glittering facade of success and ambition, had been foreclosed on. Her ledger was a sea of red ink. The $18,500 commission she'd earned was clawed back by the authorities. Her car, the one she'd called her mobile office for a boss babe, was repossessed. The marketing job she was so proud of fired her with a terse 2-sentence email citing their company's ethics clause. She was professionally radioactive. The luxury brands that once sent her free products now blocked her account. The friends who had once filled her comment section with fire emojis now wouldn't even return her calls. She was an outcast, a social leper, a cautionary tale whispered about at the very brunches she used to dominate. She had chased the image of wealth so hard that she had ended up with nothing real at all. She was a living, breathing embodiment of a negative balance sheet. My own accounting was more complex. A few weeks after the raids, a check arrived in the mail. It was from the U.S. Marshals Service, my portion of the initial asset forfeiture, $31,000. I held it in my hand. It felt small. It was a fraction of what was stolen, a pittance compared to the 5 years of discipline it represented. It wasn't a victory. It was a refund on a catastrophic investment. But the real return, the true profit from this entire ordeal wasn't monetary. It was the silence. It was the profound, soul-cleansing peace of an empty apartment. That first weekend, I undertook a ritual, a purge. I bought 50 heavy-duty cardboard boxes and I began to erase her. Every trace of Jessica, every physical manifestation of her aspirational life was systematically dismantled. The oversized vision board in her office, covered in cutouts of mansions and private jets, was the first to go. I tore it from the wall and folded it in half the sound of tearing cardboard, a small, satisfying crack of thunder in the quiet room. Her closet, a chaotic explosion of fast fashion and designer knockoffs, was next. I didn't fold anything. I just swept armfuls of glittery synthetic fabrics into black trash bags. The 100+ throw pillows on our bed and sofa, each one a different texture, but all of them equally useless, were piled into a mountain in the living room. The endless collection of coffee mugs with slogans like "Hustle Harder" and "Good Vibes Only." The scented candles that smelled like mahogany teakwood and success. Everything that represented her hollow, aesthetic-driven existence was boxed up, taped shut, and stacked by the front door like a monument to a failed state. When it was done, I stood in the middle of the living room. The air felt lighter, the space felt bigger. It was my apartment again, just mine. The most valuable thing she left behind was the space she once occupied. The next Saturday, I did something I hadn't done in years. I called my old college friend Mark, the one Jessica had always dismissed as a boring history teacher with no ambition. I asked him if he wanted to go hiking. We drove up to the mountains, the very place she had once called a pointless waste of a Saturday with bad cell service. We didn't talk about Jessica, not really. We talked about history, about books, about the simple, absurd comedies of our college days. As we stood at the summit, the sun on my face, and a cool breeze cutting through the crisp autumn air, I felt a kind of joy so pure and uncomplicated that it almost brought me to tears. It wasn't the manic, desperate excitement Jessica chased. It was peace. It was real. This was the freedom. It wasn't about being single. It was about being free from the exhausting, relentless pressure of her personal brand. Free from the silent judgment in her eyes when I chose a simple beer over an overpriced cocktail. Free from having my passions and my friends weighed and measured on her scale of social currency and found wanting. I was no longer a supporting character in the movie of her life, I was just me. And for the first time in 4 years, that felt like more than enough. I was finally in the black, my life's ledger balanced not by dollars and cents, but by the quiet, incalculable value of my own peace of mind. The trial was quick, a formality really. The evidence was a mountain. Brianna got 12 years in federal prison. 12 years for a $14 million lie. Jessica pleaded guilty. The commissions, the recruitment, posts the messages where she acknowledged people couldn't withdraw funds, but kept recruiting anyway, there was no defense. She got 18 months. At sentencing, she tried one last time to play the victim, crying about manipulation and betrayal. The judge, a woman who had clearly seen it all, looked down at her over her glasses and delivered the final verdict on her character. "Miss Winters," she said, her voice cutting through the silent courtroom, "you received nearly $20,000 for recruiting victims to a scheme you had reason to know was fraudulent. You are not a victim. You are a perpetrator. My father's inheritance is mostly gone forever. For a while, that loss was a sharp physical ache. It wasn't just the money. It was the last tangible thing he'd left me, a symbol of his lifetime of hard work, of his belief in a stable, carefully built future. But then I thought about the man he was. He valued honesty over profit. He valued a firm handshake over a flashy promise. He would have been deeply disappointed about the money, yes, but he would have been disgusted by the lie, by the sheer predatory greed of it all, and I know, he would have been proud of the son who refused to let that lie stand no matter the financial cost. He would have understood that sometimes you have to lose money to save your soul. Jessica had shown me the brutal truth about shortcuts. Greed is a shortcut that doesn't just lead to a dead end, it leads off a cliff, and it takes everyone you're willing to betray down with you. She thought trust was a vulnerability to be exploited. I learned it has to be built on something real, not on the shimmering, hollow promise of a fantasy. My life is quiet now, it's simple, it's not the life of a crypto millionaire she promised, it's better. It's a life I earned built on facts and hard work. The peace I have now, that's the real generational wealth. I didn't win by arguing, I won by choosing the right path, by acting decisively, and by letting the consequences she created unfold naturally.